All right, so without further ado, I'm gonna pass this off to Rob Small. Take it away, Robert.
Okay, welcome everyone. The Nikolai Legacy Group welcomes you to tonight's inaugural Reach Out Zoom in a series entitled In the Moment, Conversations on Creative Thinking, Acting, and Being. We are celebrating the evolving legacy of ideas in motion that Alwyn Nikolai and Murray Lewis invited us to investigate. The Nikolai Legacy Group is initiating a series of informal Zoom conversations where 7 decades of dancers, students, teachers, colleagues, and writers will speak candidly in the moment about how we continue to live with, apply, and advance Nick and Murray's aesthetics and pedagogical theories in our own practices, both inside and outside dance. And as we look forward, we welcome more recent generations, if you are out there, into these conversations as we share our histories, remembered experiences, and stories. Good evening, my name is Robert Small, and I met Murray Lewis while I was in the dance department at UCLA and in 1970 and danced in his company, Murray Lewis Dance Company, from 1971 to 1980. And then I toured and taught as a solo dance artist in the United States, Mexico, and Europe in the 1980s. I am a member of the Nikolai Legacy Group, along with Lynn Levine Rico, Marsha Wardell Kelly, Phyllis Lamhut, Peter Kyle, Natasha Simon, Lynn Levine Rico, who I think I maybe mentioned twice. Yes. Natasha Simon, Trista D. Philippus, Elizabeth Higgins, and Kitty Cunningham. And I want to give a big thank you. And I want to give a big thank you to the artistic director of the Nikolai Lewis Dance.
You left out Janice.
That's okay.
No, it's not.
Janice Brenner. And I want to give a big thank you to the artistic director of the Nikolai Lewis Foundation for Dance, Alberto Del Saz, for supporting this series of Zoom conversations. But before we go too far forward, I want to introduce our guests in this, our first conversation titled The Originals. Bailin, there she is, Phyllis Lamhut, and Coral Martindale. These 3 amazing women were indeed originals, as they were there at the beginning as Alwyn Nikolai evolved and developed his theories of time, space, shape, motion, and energy at the Henry Street Playhouse on the Lower East Side of Manhattan that began in 1949. Just so you don't have to do the math, that was 72 years ago. And I will let that sink in for just a moment. Tonight, we will have a conversation with Gladys, Phyllis, and Coral for about an hour, and then Peter Kyle and Janice Brenner will open the chat window for some questions or comments.
Where's Coral? She's not on.
I don't see Coral up there.
Here I am.
She's here.
Hello.
Gladys,
Yeah.
I see you. Phyllis, I see you. And Coral, now I see you. Welcome. We are so pleased to have a conversation with you 3. Gladys, you lived on the Lower East Side and already taking dance classes at the Henry Street Settlement Playhouse. When Nick arrived in 1949, you were 19 years old. And what was your impression of Nick when you first were introduced to him and his teaching?
I was blown away. I mean, it was a kind of training that had a real basis, you know. It was organized. It wasn't just taking classes. I thought it was amazing. It was not just a class. Suddenly it was an art form, and it was something that I'd never given much thought to because I'd always danced. You just move your body and that's it. But Nick brought, you know, something deeper to that. Plus, it was not just a dance class. You had to do a whole series of training. You had theory, you know, which we later called improvisation. You had a technique class, a theory class, and then you had composition, which was choreography class. Um, he also, he had a need too. And that's one of the things, I think it was a wonderful convergence, a confluence of needs. We needed a great teacher. He needed a group of people to train because he wanted to, he was a choreographer. He needed people to dance his stuff. And it was an amazing group. I mean, Phyllis and me and Carl, we were just willing. We just gave ourselves to Nick. We trusted him completely. I don't think any of us had ever had that kind of in-depth training.
Great,
So I don't want
great.
to take up all this time. Other people can add in there.
Phyllis, you were 15 and I think you were taking ballet classes with Gladys at the Playhouse. Tell us how you met Nick, Phyllis.
Well, one summer, I came back, we had the summer off, and I came back to register for my ballet class because I was going to be the greatest ballerina in the world. And I was really very involved with ballet. And as I came in and came toward the office, Gladys came running down and she said, don't be alarmed, Phyllis, no more ballet, because she was my ballet mate. I think it was just two of us in the class. So I said, what do you mean? She said, go upstairs, go upstairs. So I went upstairs and there was this man with a blondish hair and a red shirt open at the collar. I've never seen a man with an open collar shirt. And it was like a shock to me. And he said, hello. And I said, he said, what can I do for you? And I said, well, I'd like to take your course that you're offering. And he said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 15 years old. And he said, well, I'm sorry, you're too young. And I said, but I want to dance. And he said, you're in.
And Coral, you were in high school when you came to the Playhouse in 1952.
Yes.
How were you initially introduced to those classes?
Well, I was introduced by my dance teacher at Morris High School. She selected myself and another student. We were friends, and we just loved dance. So she was conducting a dance class at Morris, and the two of us, for her, stood out. And so she wanted to introduce us to Nick. And so
She knew Nick, by the way.
she knew Nick because she took classes at Henry C. Playhouse. True that, she did. Because she was taking classes down there. She wanted us to take classes on a Saturday with her. So I was 18 and I hadn't fully graduated yet. I graduated at 18, but she took myself and a girl called Miriam down to Henry Street Playhouse, and we started class, and we were living there as a result of, we were just fascinated because as Gladys said, that he was a fascinating man. I mean, he really, the whole demeanor, the way he, and he was very sociable. I mean, in terms of us, it was like he was family. So I practically lived down there. And so I started studying down there, and he introduced me to the aesthetics of dance that I never knew before. The way he painted pictures, the way he choreographed, the way he introduced us to theory. No class was ended ever without theory. I understand they changed that name, but when I was there, it was theory. He gave you all kinds of images and things to think about, and then he said, now make a dance. And so we had that. We did, and we did, and that stuck with me. That whole idea stuck with me because really it made you go in depth to yourself. You really don't know what you can do until you do it. So that's how I met Nick.
Great. From you three, I'm beginning to sense a certain fire and determination in these young women there. I mean, you were individuals, you were perceived as individuals, and so that's great. Coral, you told me in a previous conversation that if you had not been a dancer, you would have been a track runner. So
Yeah.
Nick must have loved your inexhaustible energy and enthusiasm.
Oh yeah. Well, we all were enthusiastic, so yeah, I added it. I added myself to it.
Great.
So,
Is the story true that he asked you to run up the concrete cyclorama on the back wall of the Henry Street Playhouse
oh,
Theater?
that
Is that a true
story.
story?
That story's still around.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. But the way he did it was notable, because like in a way he was like a Svengali, because he said, I want you to look at the wall, just look at it until it turns into the floor. That's how he went about talking to me. He didn't let me run to the wall or anything. He just said, just look at it, and when you get ready, run at it like it's the floor, not a wall. And so he stayed there. We talked and did a whole lot of stuff, and then he said, all right, when you're ready. When I was ready, I was like hypnotized. I was like hypnotized, and I ran and went up the wall and came back down. I couldn't believe it that I did it.
The only one who could actually do it.
Well, no, Bill did it. Bill did it too.
Frank did it.
Yeah,
Bill
maybe
did it too, Bill Frank. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I couldn't believe it.
now,
And I just loved it.
Now, Murray Lewis arrived at the Playhouse in 1950, and all of you really embarked what I call a shared journey of discovery as Nick developed his theories and teaching methodologies. As you mentioned in the training with Nick at the Playhouse, you had classes in technique, theory, composition, pedagogy, dance notation, percussion, and stagecraft. So as Coral says, that range of classes provided you all with many skills that served you throughout your careers.
And making music.
And making music. Gladys, you performed with Nick, then Murray Lewis, and then Don Redlick. In the early 1970s, you became chair of the dance program at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. You received a Distinguished Professor Award and many other honors before you retired. How did Nick's theories and methodologies inform your teaching and the development of the dance program at Ohio University?
Well, you know, I think what happened with Nick's teaching is that it was very organized. He had a very orderly mind. And the way in which it all sort of put itself together made it a very clear way of approaching teaching. And then later, I think it got organized into time, space, energy, and shape, and all of that. But while he was, I think it was Murray who probably put all that together and organized it, because Nick couldn't take time to write it all down. Murray was the chronicler of the theory. And sometimes Murray got it wrong, but for the most part, he got it right. And it was good to have it down. But I think those of us who were there at the very beginning with Nick, we had the best of Nick at that particular time, because he came to head that dance program and he was going to make something happen. And he did. It had a theater. You had, you know, what is now, I looked at the studio a few years ago and I thought, how did we all move so fast and do all that in that small room? It was called the large studio, but it was actually a pretty small room. And everything was there. And of course, there was a piano in the corner. And I don't know if the later people ever heard Nick accompany class on the piano, but boy, he was a genius on the piano as well as on the drums. So I think those early years, those of us at the beginning really had the best of Nick.
Right.
Because he was going to make something happen in that playhouse, and we were the beneficiaries of all of that wonderful early days when it was developing.
Phyllis, you danced with Nick for 20 years and Murray Lewis for 4 years and headed your own company, the Phyllis Lamhut Dance Company, for 20 years. You are a Guggenheim Fellow and have received numerous awards from the National Endowment for the Arts. You are currently on the faculty of New York University's Tisch School of the Arts and teaching a course titled Principles of Dance Composition and Motional Research. In addition to your teaching at NYU, you mentor many professional choreographers currently in the field. How does your background, approach to teaching and language resonate with current dancers and younger choreographers?
It resonates quite well because the emphasis that I make is that motion is the engine for creative thinking, acting, and being. And I'm interested in seeing motion. I'm not interested in seeing ego. I'm not interested in looking in the mirror. I feel that the students need to feel more and sense their bodies and bring, I would say, the challenge for them in my classes is to be aware of totality of the body, sensation, feeling. The brain is subject to that. It is not the priority. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Coral, you danced in the choreography of both Nick and Murray until 1958.
Right.
Then started a family that included 2 sons. You established a dance theater for youth in Brooklyn and also worked with at-risk youth. You taught dance, theory, and choreography. In 2008, you established a liturgical dance ministry in your church that still exists today. How did all of those that worked with you, how did they respond to the ideas and methodologies that you learned and experienced with Nick? Was there a transfer there?
Yeah, well, one thing Nick did, and I think that Gladys and Phyllis will talk about it, is that he brought everything out of us. Like, I didn't know my capabilities in terms of dance and choreography or theory, any of that, until I took his classes, and he taught us everything. We even made costumes. We made everything we could put a theater together. That's why I started that theater for underprivileged children in Brooklyn. And like what I got out of those children was just wonderful, wonderful, because a lot of them were street children in terms of like, they were like hard, they were not soft. A lot of them were like hard, but they were very, very talented. But they didn't even know they were that talented. Like that theory, that's why I don't know why they changed it to improvisation, but that theory part is outstanding because it took those children to another level of themselves that they didn't even know existed. Like I had one little girl that was like, she was incorrigible. I mean, she was really bad. and when you learned about her life, you understood why she was that way. But and the kids didn't even really like her either because she had an attitude. And so anyway, the theory part is how I got to her. I didn't get to her through the dance. I got to her through the theory. Like when Nick told us, like, I would throw like images out to them. So I threw an image of a feather falling, the feather falling, being grabbed by the wind before it hit the ground. And so like they shunned her, they didn't really want to be with her ever. But when she came back out of the corner with her idea, her choreography of that feather coming down, being caught by the wind, everyone was knocked out. Everyone was knocked out. They wanted to dance with her because after that I made them, teach the dance, whatever it is that they did. And it was a beautiful dance, beautiful. And so therefore, after that, she felt good about herself. She wasn't as hostile as she started out to be. She became, friendly, and the kids liked her. And she was some choreographer, let me tell you. She, the songs of the day was how I got to them, so that I could introduce Bach and Prokofiev and all the other composers. I could introduce to them and they would not even flick. But I first had to use their music, what they liked. And after that, after that was broken, that wall was finished. I mean, in terms of resistance, there was nothing I couldn't ask them to do. So that's Nick with me. And I took it to another level by going to, by taking it through I adopted his theories in my head myself, and I saw how they worked. I saw what they did to young people. I saw what they did to older people, and I took it right through my life. My lifestyle was Nick's theories.
So I'm sensing that this was transformational, and you have transformed people. People have been transformed through you, which I think is part of the legacy. Phyllis, did you want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say something. We're living in a time now where brain activity is very strong. How do new ways of thinking reflect upon the body? How does sensation of motion reflect upon the mind? I encourage my students to feel free and explore most of their ideas as much as they can through improvisation, otherwise known, i.e. theory. But it's the freedom of exercising sensation, the body in that sensory form, and how that affects the brain. Not thinking before acting and being, but being and sensing and then thinking. I just walk up the steps backwards.
Gladys, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, I think I wanted to say that I think this small group that we had the best of Nick, because he had just arrived. He was going to set up a training session, not just a session, a school, and he was going to develop all these people. So he had a vision, he had a place, and he had a theater. That was really extraordinary, not just a studio, but a whole place to take his creative ideas as well as. But I think we have to give him enormous credit for the teaching and the ideas he put forth. It was, I think those of us at the early part were just beneficiaries of something quite extraordinary. Because Nick wasn't tired, because later he got tired of doing the same thing. But, it was fresh. He had a brand new theater. He had new bodies, new people to deal with. And it was very exciting. It was also a very exciting time because in 1950, there were, the war was over. There was the GI Bill. There were a lot of guys who came in who were, able to take this course as part of the GI Bill for their education. And it was very, very exciting to have classes with not just females, but a lot of guys in there. And there was an energy that I don't think we could replicate at any other time.
I only danced with Murray Lewis, so I only sensed how he choreographed on us. But Phyllis, can you talk about the difference between Nick's and Murray's process of developing movement for you in their choreography?
Well, with Nick, it was experimental. He would have an idea, and I'm doing this before the multimedia entered. I'm doing the motion, when he entered with the costumes, props, and lighting, it was even more investigation. But he would have us investigate an idea through improvisation. And he would see it, and then he would tinker with it, really, what we did, and then develop what he saw into his idea through his own persona. So he added to what we saw, what we did through his sense of perception. I would say in Murray, Murray was wonderful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2. He counted everything, and we did a lot of music and and a lot of moving all over the place, and then we do Bach. You did Bach, Gladys. He danced to Bach, and it was like a whole other world with Murray. And you didn't have to do anything because he counted everything. It was,
He
knew
choreographed.
how the movement was going to eventually develop. Yeah.
Yeah, in the 70s, when I danced with Murray, he gave us every step.
Really?
Every step.
Yeah.
And some of us that were on 18th Street, we had 2 adjoining studios, and Murray Lewis's company was here. We rehearsed for 4 hours, and then we'd open the door and see this dark room where they were there till 6 o'clock at night while he was doing his lighting. And so it was I think those of you out there will remember the big difference between the 2 companies. Coral, did you have to say something?
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to say that with Nick, he was a painter. He painted the canvas, and that canvas was that's how we fit in as dancers, but his images were the whole entire canvas, and we fit in with his ideas, and he allowed us to develop our own within it. And by the time he was finished, it was a masterpiece. And that's what I got from him. I mean, he took time to paint every single thing using all the tools, and we were tools for him, and we were enthusiastic tools. So when the time it was finished, it was a work of art. That's how I always felt about his work.
So he used you to complete his vision.
Right.
I
That's
mean,
how I always felt.
He had
That's how I
something
felt.
there, and he just worked with you until it evolved into his total theater.
What he wanted, right? Whereas Phyllis is absolutely right. Murray was a 1, 2, 3 man, and he had that dance in his head, and you were going to do it his way or no way. But I love dancing with him too, because of that. So it was like those choreographers were different and enjoyable.
Nick, I understand that Nick invited other choreographers in the city to use the Playhouse stage for performances. James Waring, Merle Marsicano, Paul Sanisardo, Paul Taylor, Catherine Litz.
Taylor, right.
Are there others that you remember that were invited? Because I want Phyllis to tell us about the children's matinee appearance of Ruth St. Dennis on the Henry Street Settlement Playhouse. And Gladys, I want you to talk about, and if Coral, you saw that, I want you 3 to talk about that, about Ruth St. Dennis's performance at the Playhouse.
Well,
Start with Phyllis.
every Saturday at 3 o'clock for 10 cents, the Henry Street Settlement, this wonderful organization, took on the Henry Street Playhouse, and they presented a children's program. It would probably be, an hour or something for 10 cents. And Ruth St. Dennis had a member of her company taking classes with us. And Miss Ruth, as she was called, was making a movie, and she needed a space. And she asked Nick if she could come to Henry Street, and Nick invited her and said you could use the stage. It's wonderful, and we'd be very happy to have you. And so she also offered to do something for the Saturdays at 3 Children. And I remember, Gladys, we were sitting together. We walked into that Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock, and the place was so noisy with all these children, with the legs going, the arms going, everything going nuts. And we said, we were sitting together, and I remember, I wonder if what they're gonna do. They're so noisy. It's terrible. You know, what is gonna happen? Well, the curtain opened, and there was Miss Ruth, dressed in white, looking like the goddess from heaven, with a long, beautiful white, like almost like a sari, not a sari, some kind of drape. And she stood with the chorus of men. I think Murray was in that chorus of men at her feet. And the children whispered, "It's God, it's God." It was the most fantastic thing. And they watched the show, and it was just beautiful. And I would just like to tell you something else, like for Gladys and myself, you know, we studied Ruth St. Denis, you know, we know the name, you know, and blah, blah, blah. And we went one day looking for her behind the scenes or on stage. She wasn't on stage. She was in a scene doc. It was a wonderful backstage. It had a big scene doc, and there she was standing on her head. Remember, against the wall?
Yeah.
She was laying against the, that's the way my first vision of Ruth St. Denis was, upside down. She was in contemplation.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I remember seeing her. She was resting, and I thought she was dead. There was something incredibly still about her body, probably very concentrated. But she was an amazing presence.
Well, I don't remember too much about her, but I remember those Saturdays. They were extremely noisy, but they were really, it was joyful noise. It wasn't like, you know, just to be screaming. It was that the kids really loved those programs, those Saturday programs.
And you did a number of those shows for the kids,
Right.
St. George and the Dragon, and a number of them.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that was one of the ways in which Nick sort of primed us for performance, because those very first things we did were those children's pieces. And they were simple, they were short, and they were pretty wonderful. They were little narratives.
Right.
And it was marvelous performing opportunity. And we did that, and we actually toured with it. I remember we took it, the stuff, the sets would go in a truck, and we would sit in the truck with it and go out to some places on Long Island. I mean, it was the first, you know, touring that we did. Of course, we did everything. We
locally, right?
We danced, we
boroughs.
cleaned up, we did everything.
And then you also, because of your training, you taught children's classes there.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah,
you're
They
involved.
taught us pedagogy. We did everything. We knew theater. By the time we left, the short time, they had much longer time. The short time I left, I knew theater. I knew how to conduct a theater. That's what he did for us. And that's why Gladys is absolutely right. We had the best of him because he taught us everything.
That's right.
Coral, I just want to continue with you for just a little bit, and talk about after you stopped your dancing and you started your family, you also went into the corporate banking world.
Yeah.
How did, and in our conversation—
I see you laughing, Gladys. I see you laughing. Yes, I was a banker.
Wow. And so can you just tell us, was there any transmission of your determination and your gumption to be in the corporate world and assert yourself? How?
Absolutely. I started at nothing. You know those little funny numbers at the bottom of your checks?
Yes.
Those numbers, that's the department I was in, all right? That's how low that was. And I left a full vice president as a result of what Nick had pumped into me the times that I was at the Playhouse. I left and took that same thing in terms of how he conducted classes. I took it to the bank. And I did. And I taught that way. And anytime they had any opportunity available for promotion, my hand went up. Others would be ducking. Maybe they didn't want it. They would rather, have a break or whatever. My hand went up. By the time I reached full vice president, I knew how to train. They trained me to train. I took my hand up at every single opportunity. And that's what Nick was doing at the Playhouse. Everything that, every smell that I know it. I never asked him, but everything that passed his eyes, his nose, whatever, he turned into a work of art. I was so fascinated by him. I had never met anyone like that. And then he was so sharing. I never met anyone like that. So he had a very, very big impression on me.
So with the image of Miss Ruth and Coral climbing the corporate ladder, I'm going to wrap up the conversation. But before we go, Peter, Kyle, and Janice Brenner, and before we go to the chat, I just want to say that in the 1950s, you, Gladys, Phyllis, and Coral were part of a confluence of historical events, as you said, Gladys, in the dance world that produced numerous influential choreographers. But Alwyn Nikolais was truly, from our understanding from later generations, was truly a Renaissance man who developed an innovative world of multimedia dance theater and transformed the way audiences viewed dance. It was transformative. But tonight we celebrate you three women who were part of his world. And do you have anything further to say about any personal experiences?
Well, the only thing I can say is that the training
tonight,
that he gave us
from
set
today
me
and
up for
future
my life,
generations.
essentially. I mean, I can't think of anything better than to have had dance training that suddenly becomes your life. And it's all the lessons that you learn implicitly and not necessarily explicitly about movement. It's about the experience itself. And it made great sense to me. It was not something, it wasn't just an art form by itself, it was a life form.
Right.
Well, we're at a confluence now with the various movements of Me Too and the women's movement and COVID and social justice. And so we are at a brink of something and maybe a tipping point. So maybe to the dancers and choreographers out there, to keep the fire that you three women have and still have, and carry on and use your body, use your experiences, absorb and make dance.
Absolutely. I just want to add that I took Nick and his theories and everything that I learned, and it really held me up a lot, so that when the years that were passing, I had so many deaths in my family that even that helped. Even his theories and all of that helped me to transition to what I ended up doing in 2008 when I started that liturgical dance at the church. Was my past. I mean, I was one of 6 children. I am the only one left. All my siblings are gone, and my mother and my father are gone. And so I was going through a lot in those 20 odd, 40 years or whatever it is that I, since I got married. And I had a lot. When I found God, that helped. Because even with going into the church, I went in with Nick.
Wow.
I did. I went in with Nick. So, I feel tremendously blessed by being a part of it, by being a part of him. And I was able to transfer how I did everything into the church's liturgical dance. So
Bravo.
yeah, bravo for Nick.
Yeah.
I would just like to say one little thing. Since I was young and grew up, touring the world was the most exciting thing in my life. Being able to dance all over the world on tour, and Nick taking us out all the time and meeting kings and queens. I mean, and presidents and all these high-end people, and being sort of pretty while I was on the road was another thing, because the next day I was in the cold theater, somewhere in Germany or Norway or something like that. But I must say, this is one thing that is amazing. Nick enabled me to maintain my imagination. And for some, that's an ultimate challenge. But my imagination, I credit him. Structuring my imagination is wonderful. And when I make new work is only a passage of what will come next as an experiment. It is not a fait accompli. I don't have a style. And I'm grateful that I don't have a style. So that's what I have to say.
And Gladys, do you have anything to say?
I just look back and think what a lucky person I was to have found Nick to be not just a dance teacher, but a teacher in the best sense of the word. It was a kind of life lesson that that carried me through all those years of teaching, of just being a person, and being a person with sensitivity to other people, which is what you learn when you're in a company. You're always adjusting yourself to others, and you're calibrating all the time. Yeah, I don't think my life would have been different without Nick.
Mm-hmm. I just have one personal story about the generosity of Murray. When we were dancing in the mid-70s in Iran, we performed in Tehran, but Murray, on his own dime, put us on the plane and took us to two other cities, Shiraz and Isfahan, on his own dime. And he took us and we toured these wonderful historic cities and he always said, who wants to go to the museum? Who wants to just keep, so he kept feeding us for me for 10 years. And it was just a real blessing. So, so I want to thank you, Gladys. Thank you, Coral. Thank you, Phyllis. But please stay with us because Peter and Janice are selecting some questions and comments for you. And thanks to all of you out there for joining us. And we will let you know when our next In the Moment conversation will take place. In the meantime, if you want more information about Alwyn Nikolai and Murray Lewis, please go online and visit the Nikolai Lewis Foundation for Dance, the Alwyn Nikolai and Murray Lewis Dance Collection at Ohio University, or if you are in New York City, stop by the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts at Lincoln Center. And now I'll turn the conversation to Peter and Janice. Are you ready?
We're ready.
Yes, we're ready.
Hang on,
Hi,
ladies.
everybody. I'm just dropping the links into the chat for those organizations that Robert just mentioned, the Nikolai Lewis Foundation and the Nikolai and Lewis dance collection at Ohio University. So look for those in the chat. And then Janice, do you want to get started conveying the questions?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Beautiful women. We have a question from Daniel Stein, and his question is, he would love to hear more about, quote, motional theory. Maybe be a little bit more explicit about some of the actual theories that you all worked with and that we all got passed down to us, for people who might not know that language a little bit.
Okay.
I didn't catch the second word. Motional what?
Emotional theory, a little bit
Oh,
more
motional
about emotional
theory.
theory,
Okay.
about the pedagogy of the art of motion that was so central to Nick and Murray's work.
You know, all of those, all that language came later. And it was Murray, basically, who sort of put it all together and put that book together. When Nick did it, he didn't explain any of those things. You just did it. And that was what was so great about it. You found your way through it. And then it was later that all the language sort of developed around it. And Murray, I think, shaped a lot of that language.
In my early notes, Nick gave us a feeling of resiliency, kinetic sensation, individual style, free explorations into motion, space, and time, a lot of improvisation, and with emphasis on imagination and creative sensation.
Yeah, an emphasis on imagination. It's true. Because as an example, there were a lot of, in theory class, there were a lot of dances that were done by people that I did not like at all, I could not understand. I said, what, he would give you an example. Let's just say a shoe falling, or a shoe, or getting on a bike, getting off a bike, or washing a window, whatever it is. He would give you that as the example. And then we'd go off in the corners and do our little thinking about it and choreographing. And then when we came back, you would present your dance based on that, based on that item that he'd give you, or that issue that he would give you. And a lot of them, sometimes I did not like or did not understand, but he was able to see things in the people's dances and in their choreography that I didn't. He really opened your eyes, the audience's eyes, to what the person was doing. He understood nearly every single one of them, of his students. That's what was so great about him. He had like an inner sense of what we were all about. Mm-hmm. He saw through us, and the ones that I didn't like, he would he asked them questions of why did they choreograph it that way, and after they explained it to him, he understood it, and he would then explain it to us, and so we began to. Our scope began to get wider and wider and wider. That's why theory is so important. You cannot teach dance without theory and improvisation. You really can't.
Let me take one concept and let you riff on it. In terms of time, there is for the questioner, there is in the sense of time, Nick and Murray would work with fast time, slow time.
Oh yes.
Duration. And you would go
right.
on and on and on. I mean, there are a multitude of ways of dealing with the concept of time or space, inner space, outer space.
Yes.
Near space, far space, the space inside your hand, the space in front of you, the space behind you. How many classes did we take where we walked forward and then we worked backward? We walked sideways. We walked diagonal right in terms of a spatial palette of understanding. And so to the questioner, it was so multifaceted that I know I absorbed it. And for me, it made total sense.
Sense,
And
right.
that's why I loved it from day one. And Marsha Wardell Kelly was my first partner, and we were both from the Midwest, and we both embraced each other and Murray and that philosophy, and we were a great. And he always put us together. Marcia, after Marcia, he put me together with Sarah Pearson, another great partner. And after that, it was Janice Brenner. And we all were so completely in sync with what we were sensing, as Phyllis says. And then it was coming out of us through Murray or through Nick. And it was a joy from day one.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something you said that I think is really crucial in here. You know, a lot of dance classes, the student imitates the teacher in some way, or, you know, follow. Nick didn't demonstrate that way. So we didn't have that kind of model. He would sometimes use his fingers, you know, to say, do this, 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 and this, but it was not, he was never the model. We had to find the movement ourselves.
Yeah, to dig within ourselves, right?
What to do, but he didn't show it in that
Right.
way.
That's
And
right.
that was, I think, very important, because a lot of classes you imitate the teacher.
That's right. That's true.
Also, I would just like to say that Nick was a wonderful musician. He played
yeah.
our classes.
Oh,
He
yeah.
played the percussion instruments and the piano. So as soon as he gave us what to do, he went sort of down to the piano. And sometimes the piano was wonderfully uplifting and jazzy and terrific. So the sound atmosphere in the studio was always very vibrant and diverse. So all done by one person.
He was also pretty good on the drums.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we have another question from Clarence. He's wondering, does anybody know what became of Bill Frank?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
gee.
And for some of our guests, you might want to say a brief mention about who Bill was.
Bill Frank was a member, came to the Henry Street Playhouse when he was 16 years old. He studied with us. He was, I believe, from Maryland, Coral, I believe.
Yeah, right.
From
Yeah.
Maryland. And he was wonderful. He was my partner in Nick's work. And he was big and strong and big hands, wonderful. He used to scoop me up. It was wonderful. And he was his dancing and creativity. He gave concerts at Henry Street. He was quite fluid. And I believe he died of AIDS somewhere along the line, but absolutely outstanding. He toured with us, and touring, as you know, Coral, was racially challenging.
No, was it ever?
We were not an all-white company, and it was very interesting. Bill, after a while, decided that he just disappeared. And I don't know exactly what happened, but then the word got out that he got sick. And I think he came back and visited once. He got sick and died of AIDS. But a wonderful dancer. He was creative.
He had
And,
a presence.
and
He had a stage presence.
oh, had big hands, scoop me up. I loved it.
I know. I have a gorgeous
You
picture.
know, when you're young, you know, and you get scooped up, it's wonderful.
Peter,
So maybe,
There was also in that original company, Beverly Schmidt Blossoms
yes,
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
and Dorothy Vislaki
Yes.
and Murray and Gladys and Coral and Phyllis.
Right.
yes, yes.
What a group.
Was Luke in that? Was
Incredible.
Luke's? I remember his picture. Was he ever?
Not in that one picture.
No,
No.
not that one.
No,
Right.
that was way back.
Way back, way back. All right.
we have
Um,
a picture of that original company, and maybe we can share that Peter, at a later time with everybody. You could just send it to everybody.
Yeah, I'll try to pull that up and share it.
Or else we'll
maybe
send it later.
maybe in the chat. I think I can do it that way. Good thinking, Janice. We have another question from Stephanie Scopolitas. Hi, Stephanie. She says, I'm curious what people recall Nick reading throughout time.
What did you say, reading?
Yes, if you recall what he was reading.
His
That's
personals reading?
Books. What
Okay.
books did
Wait
you
a minute. I don't know what he was reading, but when I went into his loft apartment for the first time, he had books all over the place, big art books. And I was stimulated to buy my own art books. I didn't know that was, a thing to do. But remember, Gladys, the lofts and the books and
Oh, yeah.
all those things that were all over the place. So he must have done a lot of reading and research, but it was not, he didn't walk into Henry Street with a book in his hand. So
No.
I have no idea what.
I don't know if everybody, no, they wouldn't remember this, but in those early days, he would often invite us over to the loft because he was the only person I ever knew who lived in a loft. And he would prepare dinner.
Oh,
And I tell you,
yeah.
was really
Yeah.
an art form with him.
Yeah, those
And
dinners were
it was-
fantastic,
we would
right?
throw salads together and we would all come over and munch, and what we would do for entertainment is dance with each other and mostly jitterbug. So
I don't want to open a Pandora's box, but I'm wondering if the person on the chat is wondering what his influences might have been, because everyone wants to know if he was influenced by Oscar Schlemmer, if he was influenced by Rudolf Laban, if he was influenced by Carl Jung. And so I'm not sure that he even.
I think he was. I think he was influenced by all those things.
Right,
I think he
And-
read a lot, he looked a lot, he
right.
traveled.
And he also introduced us. Like George Constant.
Oh, yes, that's
He
right.
No,
Painter.
he surrounded us with the people in the arts. And so right now you're asking that question. We're not able to really answer it, but he surrounded us and shared a lot of people with us. And so, some of the other, the scenic designers, musicians,
and composers.
composers, he exposed us to all that. And that's another thing I have to say, is that I did that when we had a group of homeless children that we used to volunteer with. And we took them and introduced them to things that they never saw, like take them skiing. We took them to the mountains. We took them, all different places that they never went. And they never forgot us as a result. They never forgot us. So it all pays off.
also, Nick had a home in Southampton.
Oh, yes.
And when we had dinner there, the place was filled with artists.
Yeah.
Arthur Osler and George Constant. I mean, I can't remember them all at this moment. Filled with artists. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We have another question from Dan Coogan. He says, I was struck by Nick's instruction, I think this was to Coral, as you were talking about it, to look at the floor until it's a wall. And he's asking, could someone elaborate on Nick's use of language to convey his ideas?
No, it's look at the wall until it's the floor. So you're not afraid to go up because you're looking at the wall like it's the floor. That's what drove me up.
Drove me up the wall.
Drove me up the wall.
You're the only one who can do it.
But more broadly, to his use of language to convey his ideas or stimulate you all, could you all, could you elaborate on that?
Oh, yeah.
I think his use of language was really marvelous.
Yeah.
He often used colorful language, and not in a pejorative way. It was he sort of always got at the essence of what it was. He didn't have to talk a lot to get what he wanted. He would just he knew how to get to the point.
Was he using the word decentralization back
I
then?
can't hear you.
Phyllis or Gladys or Coral, was he using the concept of decentralization
Yes, he was.
back then?
Yeah, he did.
But that
Well,
came
maybe-
later.
Yeah, he did. He did use decentralization. Yes. To
That's an
decentralize.
important concept in the work in our philosophy.
Because in theory of having the body, which is three-dimensional,
You're unmuted, so when you talk,
the sense of being able to enter into space, you would decentralize the body, release it into space. You would all manners of physical articulation that takes the body away from decentralization, or the way it's held, you may say, in a ballet class. So the body maintains its moving quality, not its rigidity of central form, which some techniques have, like ballet, and even in Spanish dance it is, but Spanish dance is very different in its motor base. So it is the fluidity of within that moves the body without, and you could just add on to what you like there, but he did do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Could I go back for a moment to Nick's use of language and the fact that his aim in describing to us what to do was to draw out something new, a new experience and a new solution. There was never a right and a wrong. There was never a specific thing you had to do. So that kind of notion of stare at the wall until it appears to be the floor. Well, that can't be taken literally, that it's going to become the floor. But each person who might get that instruction would interpret that differently. And that's how you have this enormous variety in improvisation and theory, because the directions and the comments were not close-ended, they were open-ended, and they encouraged you to say, well, what does it mean? And look for something, not look for what will satisfy the teacher, but to look for what that might mean.
Right.
And I think that was a way of drawing out of us what we had more out of us than we would have thought of with just our brains.
Right.
I didn't climb the wall, I was afraid.
Good. So that was, that's a very good statement. That's good, because that's what she was saying. And when you put it in your head of what he's saying to you, and if it causes you to be afraid, you're not going to go up the wall.
Right.
See, but I was at that point in my life, I guess I was like, call it crazy, whatever it is. I said, they'll bring me out in the ambulance, or I'm going up this wall.
Gladys, Coral, you were just fearless.
Yeah,
Well,
she
he kind of made. I'm trying to tell you, took that out. He brought that out of me, because a lot of times when I was coming up, I was like timid. Believe it or not, I was timid.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. And he brought that out of me. Yes. Yeah.
We have many comments in the chat about how wonderful this is. I'm going to move on to another question here from Karen Seyfried. Hi, Karen. She says, is anybody with any affiliation to our lineage that we know of doing any work with the Henry Street settlement currently, with the service or otherwise?
Well, it's the Henry Street settlement is still busy working with the community. It's an I contribute to it, so I could tell you that it's an outstanding organization for many years, even the time when my parents came from Poland to America. They went right to the Lower East Side and they knew of the Henry Street Settlement Playhouse. So a settlement, but the Playhouse, Gladys, if we remember, I think that Henry Street is a separate unit, and it's now called the Abrams Art Center because a gentleman named Abrams donated a lot of money. It's the Henry Street Settlement Playhouse, and then when you open the door, it says the Abrams Art Center. And all I know that, well, I know it's active because I go there. And the settlement is very active in, again, for housing for the poor, meals for the poor, financial advisement, and they're still in full bloom. And Gladys, and you know, you were from the neighborhood, they were doing all of that wonderful work.
They were.
Yes,
It was
just
great.
amazing, amazing.
And I live across the street. I bought an apartment across the street, so I look. My bedroom window looks over the theater, and so I keep an eye on it.
Oh,
And make sure
wow.
that
Speaking, I
James
don't know
Murphy.
who said
So I
that.
just keep an eye on it to make sure that all the ghosts that are in there still swirl around and have fun.
That's James Murphy, Gladys. That's James. Hi, James.
And also, Karen, I would also add that the last thing that we did there as a Nikolai Lewis community was to have Murray's memorial celebration
We
there.
did that there, yes.
So, and that was in the winter of 2017. I think Murray passed in early February 2016. So, yeah, that was the last thing we did as far as being affiliated with Nick and Murray and Henry Street.
Did we do a horse's mouth then?
Yes, that was before. We did Murray's Horse's Mouth
Oh, my.
there
Oh.
in 2015, and we did one years before that for Nick there as well.
Right. That's right. We have another question from wonderful Sarah Pearson. Hi, Sarah.
Uh-huh.
She asks, do you remember specific crits he gave each of you on your dancing or choreography?
You know, I found him to be remarkably generous.
Yeah, me too.
You know, even, I mean, obviously not everything everybody did was great, but he always found something
Yeah.
positive to say.
Right.
He was not a negative person. And that was very encouraging. You could always come away with saving your face and you
Now
know,
the word crit, C-R-I-T, is short for criticism, but it was not criticism. It was
Right.
suggestions and it was
Right.
just
Recommendations, right. That's
so
a-
the word crit in dance is short for a comment. For those of you out there that don't know what that word crit means.
I would like to say that in the evening class, we had something that Nick had us do to purify our bodies.
Oh dear.
He put it through a drumstick on the floor, and we had to walk over, pick up the drumstick, and hand it to him. Now, what do you think he was looking at? He was looking at how our back bent, how our thighs bent, what the purity of the activity of a gesture was. And in some cases, the backs were in different directions. The knees never bent, you know, the totality to do a gesture. I mean, I remember, do you remember that at night when we used to?
I remember that.
Yeah. That's how you get technique. You know, go down and pick up a drumstick and be absolutely, you know, everything just works toward the purity of the action.
And doing it over and
No
over.
physical tension, no physical tension.
Yeah, and doing it over
Would
and over and over.
would he prompt you all in any way other than just say, please go pick up the stick and bring it to me?
That's right. And he'd ask us,
Told you how to do it.
yep. Then
Never.
Or run up the wall. It was very simple. It was very simple.
Well, he would say, I remember from, you know, years later that what you're saying, Phyllis, his famous comment, which I still use because he said it, was, don't comment on picking up the stick, just pick up the
Pick
stick.
up the stick.
Yeah.
Pick up the
Be as
damn
correct
stick.
as possible.
Oh, they did. That's true.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I say something? I remember being showing him my first big comp from my first year studying with him, and I still remember the crit he gave me. He said, "You are relying on invention to keep the interest of the audience. Trust in the mystique of the moment."
Wow,
Wow, that's a good one.
that's a
Do
pretty
you use that today?
comment.
Do you use that?
All the time.
Hmm.
Say that again, Sarah.
You are relying on invention to keep the interest of the audience. Trust in the mystique of the moment.
Wow,
Right. Wonderful.
pretty
We have
deep.
it recorded. It's recorded.
It's recorded.
Indeed. We still have a few minutes here, and I want to encourage anybody else who's viewing or listening in to please drop any questions you might have into the chat. Or, you know, we're not too high on formality here. You could also unmute yourself and just ask it that way. We welcome any more questions from any of you.
Hi, Peter. Tito.
Hey, Tito.
Hi. I just want to add on what Karen was asking about the involvement of the settlement of the Abrams Arts Center. Nick has been, it's almost going to be 30 years since Nikolai passed away, which is hard to believe. In those 30 years, there has been I have produced 3 seasons at the Henry Street Playhouse. And actually the last one was with 5 of the people that are present here, Peter, Trista, Liz, myself, and James. We put a full evening together. And these were people that we have danced together at one point. And it had been a gap of 25 years since we last danced together. And we had a standing ovation. So it was the actual last show that we had all put together in there.
Great.
I remember Phyllis coming to the rehearsal of, I think it was Tensile Involvement.
Yeah.
We actually,
right.
we also got together for the first time on stage the evening of the performance. And we ran the piece twice. And then we went on stage. So very much it stays in your DNA. It's part of who we are. And we carry that on. So thank you all for doing that.
When was that, Tito? When was that?
It was for the 125th anniversary of the Henry Street Playhouse.
Just 100.
Or the 100th.
100.
Yeah. So
And we
yeah,
still did the costumes.
I think it was the 100th anniversary of the Abrams Art Center. So it was a very exciting time for, I mean, it was great to see some of these dancers having their children coming to watch them dance for the first time on stage live. Like Pamela and Trista, and I think Liz, I don't know if you brought your children, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
they actually, it's so funny. They just mentioned the other day about meeting Mary Lewis. They still remember it. Yeah, because he was there that night. That was a beautiful evening.
That was special. Thanks, Tito. We have a message from wonderful Tandy Beal, who says John Scoville, who created Nick's last score, as well as one for Murray, would be delighted to send sound samples to you, as he says, anybody need any music? So if anybody's looking for music, reach out to John by way of Tandy.
Nice.
Amazing. And Carlo has a question. Carlo Pellegrini. Was Nick focused on the technology of his theatrical presentations at the same time as he was developing his physical theories?
Who's physical theory?
Yeah, well, was he focused on his technology or developing his multimedia? Is that what?
Carlo, if you want to unmute and clarify the question, you're welcome to, but he said, oh, go ahead, Carlo.
Yes, that's basically it. Was he developing the physicality of his theatrical presentations while he was developing the theories as presented initially at Henry Street when you all were there?
The first dances he made were pure, with pure lighting. As time went on, when was Mass Props and Mobiles? Robert, 1953 or
Yeah, something like that.
48. By the time that,
Yeah.
he began to experiment with fabric, with different kinds of costumes, with lighting, and that's when he had the first elastic one. Yes, it took him from 48 to 52, 53, and he started right away working with fabric because he did aluminum where they're underneath there. And I bought him, I had a boyfriend that was in the garment district, so I went to his place and he gave me fabric for one of Nick's dances. And for nothing. And then we used to walk around to Orchard Street on the Lower East Side and go into the stores to get contributions for the Henry Street Settlement Playhouse. So Nick could have a lot of stuff so he could do things with. So
yes, I also remember he'd go, I'm sorry, Phyllis. He would also go down to Canal Street.
Canal Street.
A lot of junk. And, artistic stuff and junk. He'd come back with various kinds of plastic or whatever it was. It was just unusual things that, nobody would really find use for, except maybe.
Yeah, but Gladys, Cora, listen, he walked in one day, we were in the studio, he came in and we heard this clank of noise on the floor. He brought discs.
Those discs.
Oh, those big discs.
Just a big disc. And he had 2 holes drilled in it. And he had some that used to be U.S. Army stores there, what are they called? Yeah. So he had straps. He said, strap this on your foot. So they put this outside floor, He had this thing, he put it through. He said, okay, go on point.
Yes. I forgot about that, Phyllis. Thank you. That's true.
I had to go to the bar.
All kinds of things.
Myself up on this thing, and then we walked around stumping. Cut our toes off, and then we laid down and tried to lift them up. And
that's right.
We were hysterical that day upstairs in the studio with those clunkers. and then he made discs and kaleidoscope. And
that's right. That's a very famous dance.
Gladys, were you? Yeah, Gladys, you were in there with that.
Yes, she was in. Yeah, we were all.
He loved going to hardware stores because he don't find all sorts of things and then just turn ordinary hosing into something artistic.
Right. Getting back to that plastic that Gladys was talking about, all kinds of things he would pick up and come in and make a costume out of it. Because one of my solos was a plastic. He had everything but stapled on me.
Well, I can remember when he actually painted. We had that stretch lizard skin because we didn't have stretch fabric at the time. Right. It had elastic in it.
We had it painted on us.
And he would be wearing that and he would paint a design on it.
Right. Absolutely.
We have a follow-up question from Carlo. Does anyone remember the white rope that Nick would bring out when he was stuck in his choreography?
The what?
The white rope. Could I ask? Could I make a request that anybody who's in the meeting who's not asking a question that they mute themselves, please? Go ahead, Carlo. Rephrase your question.
When Joe and I were in the company, very often Nick would bring out a long length of white rope when he was especially stuck he didn't know what to choreograph next, and Beth and Gerald would be beckoned to go get the white rope from, and when it would come out, we would all stand around with this white rope and, you know, improvise with it. And about 3 days later, we were all bored, and Nick was very bored, and then
Yeah.
he'd start choreographing again.
Mhm.
I wonder if it was something that through the history
No,
was a,
Nick,
no,
No, I don't
Nick
think
was
so.
never bored.
No, when he first started, he was on fire.
Yeah.
It took years. It took years to take that fire out. He was on fire, and so
What were the years you're talking about, Carlo?
from 75 to 78.
See, that was already, we had him in the
we
50s
had
when
in
it
the
was all new and
50s. Yeah,
fresh.
in the 50s, he was
Different.
smoking.
I have a question, and I don't know. Well, it's sort of historical in nature potentially, but I'm wondering if you all recall Nick talking about his beginnings in Hartford.
Yes.
And in particular, I dug into some of the archives here in Hartford at the Wadsworth Atheneum, the art museum there, and found some beautiful old art, newspaper articles about the puppet theater that Nick created and directed, and apparently toured across, not just in Hartford, but in other parts of Connecticut. But I'm wondering if you all remember him speaking at all in any specific way about his beginnings.
Some, not a lot. I don't.
Yeah, well, first of all, he was a musician, you know, and he played the piano, as I mentioned, in class. And early years, he played the organ for silent films. And later on, he did the puppetry, and the puppetry, he still continued, but with human beings when he came to Henry Street, because I felt that the effect of his ability to decorate or manipulate figures had a lot to do with his early period of puppetry. There was something about it that I felt was that. But he also choreographed for the was it the Hartford Opera Company. He also choreographed duels from operas, because sometimes he would leave us at Henry Street the first year to go and do an engagement with the opera in Hartford. I just think that he did a lot of interesting things before he formed his own company in Hartford. Yeah.
We are at 9:30, and I just want to ask if there's any final question for our wonderful, wonderful panelists. We will. I want to let everybody know that, as I did at the top of the event, that this has been recorded, and we will, at a later date, once we edit out some of the beginning and ending noise, etc. Hopefully, we will post this or find a way to share it. Tito has kindly offered to make a space for it, potentially on the Nikolai Lewis Foundation website. But we will be having, as Robert alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, that this is really the first effort of this series of conversations that we in the Nikolai Legacy Group are looking to share and continue going forward. So please stay tuned for future announcements about these conversations. I'd again check out the nikolailewis.org website for information about the foundation and goings on there, and also the Alwyn Nikolai and Murray Lewis Dance Collection at Ohio University, which is an incredible resource that we are working hard to try to help get all that material digitized so it's more accessible. That's a huge effort. Otherwise, go make a trip out to Ohio and visit it
Yes,
in
and then
person.
come visit me because I live in Athens.
That's right. That's right.
Peter?
Yes, Tito.
I was supposed to be on my way to Paris to a symposium. So I'm going to, and I'm not going because of the pandemic, but it's still happening. And Nick is featured in this symposium. I'm gonna drop the link for their website. You won't be able to actually see the chat, the lecture. I was gonna do it with Mark Lawton, but I think it will be interesting. I hope it will be interesting for people to see the kind of program that they had put together. So I'm gonna drop there's two links, one for the general symposium in here, and then one specifically for the event, for the evening of where Nick is featured.
When is that going to be, Tito?
It's supposed to. I was supposed to have this exchange with an audience this coming Friday, but it has been recorded. I mean, it has been kind of all planned that is going to still happen with Mark being live there, and I'm going to join them the last 10 minutes for a kind of question and answer. But there will be a transcript of it at one point. It's done. It's translated to English and French. So it's very, from what I've seen, it's very interesting, the people that they are featuring and all the different kind of backgrounds in here. So if anybody's interested in I just put the two links there for the general symposium, and then the last link is for that specific day that Nick is being featured.
Thank you, Tito. Now that we are just past 9:30, I want to thank everybody again, especially Robert for moderating such a wonderful conversation, and most especially our amazing three originals, Gladys, Phyllis, and Coral. It's just so heartening, and the comments in the chat, we will save all of these, and who knows, we'll find a way to share them somehow. But thank you everybody for being here with us, and we look forward to seeing you again, hopefully soon.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fabulous job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bless you, Phyllis Lamhut. Thank you.
Fabulous, fabulous.
Thanks.
Thank you all. It was really beautiful.
Hi, Norton.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Gladys. Bye, Coral.
Thank you.
Great
Bye-bye.
job, Bree.
All right.
Nobody wants to leave.
Nobody wants to
know.
leave.
No, I'm looking to
All
do
right.
This is one of those moments where we just have to pull the plug, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
Do it.
All right.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
It's
Bye,
wonderful.
bye, Liz. Bye,
Bye.
Peter.
Bye-bye.
Love everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.